My father was a brilliant man, and a dangerous one. He engineered a small town underground for us to live in because he believed that the world above was gone. That is where I was born, and where I lived my entire life. Up until last week, when, in desperation, my mother helped push open the hatch and hoist me outside, into the sunlight. My father was wrong about the world ending 40 years ago. But if the thing that devoured him ever makes it above ground, the world may still yet end. I was the first history teacher to have been born below. So in the beginning, it felt very strange to tell the children about the history of humanity back when it existed above. But my mother pointed out that when she had learned it above, her teachers had never seen most of the things that they related either. That's why we learn history, she'd said, so that we can remember what we never knew. You will do wonderfully, Akeya. On the day the walls began to rumble, I was teaching the history of how we came to live below. Seth Whalen was an accomplished engineer working for the United States government on a military project. I began. He was quite aware of how destructive the weapon that he was designing was, because after all, he was its chief inventor. Yet at the time, he was naive and believed the man who told him that the weapon would only be used as a safeguard, a last resort to prevent a doomsday scenario. By the time he came across some documents indicating otherwise, it was too late. His design was in their hands, and there was nothing that he could do about it. I paused as I felt the first tremor. I didn't think anything of it, as tremors were a common occurrence. Still, there had been some bad shifts in the past, with more projected in the future, so we had to take the early warning sign seriously. "Was that a shift, Miss Whalen?" asked one of my students, Aiden. "No, Aiden," I said. "It was merely a tremor, and it seems to have passed. Now, I will continue with the lesson. As I was saying, Mr. Whalen discovered that there were indeed plans to use the weapon aggressively as soon as it was completed. My father, that is, Mr. Whalen, estimated that he had 2 years to do something about it. That was how long he calculated that he could stall the project." Kara, my daughter, raised her hand. "Yes, Kara?" "What was the weapon to be used for?" I hesitated. This was always the hardest part. To reveal to the children that humanity had killed itself off, and the world along with it. Recall the tensions between the US and the Soviets that I've been teaching you about. The so-called Cold War. With the ever-present lurking threat of nuclear engagement, the weapon was many times more powerful than any existing nuclear weapon, and was meant to turn the Cold War into the hottest war imaginable. That was what was slated to happen. Mr. Whalen tried to point out the obvious, that by the time the weapon actually gathered enough energy to fire, the Soviets would have had enough time to send off their entire nuclear arsenal. It meant the end of the world. But nobody listened to him. Another tremor hit, this time more intense. The walls shook so hard that the clock fell down and shattered on the floor. "Perhaps we should continue the lesson another time," I said. "Class is dismissed. You are all to make your ways directly home and listen to your guardian's instructions." "But we were just getting to the part where Grandpa built below," said Kara. "We'll pick up there tomorrow," I said. "Come on now, everyone is to go straight home. Kara, you come with me." This happened on occasion, and was nothing to be much alarmed about yet. I waited to make sure that each child was heading in the right direction. The school was situated in the exact center of the 3rd floor, to symbolize the importance that knowledge and wisdom had in our lives. Our houses encircled the school, comprising the remainder of the 3rd floor. The 2 floors above where we lived were taken up with agriculture. The floor below was for administrative work, and the floor below that was for manufacturing. When the children were all walking down the proper paths out of the school courtyard, I began walking to my own home with my daughter. As we were passing by the bench near Sapiendum Lake, where I had my first kiss as a teenager, the ground jolted violently, and Kara was thrown off her feet. I hurried to help her up. "It's a shift, isn't it, Mama?" she asked, rubbing her knee and sniffling a bit. "It may well be," I said. "We'd better hurry inside." We rushed back to our house and went inside. My father was in his usual place, in the meditation room, sitting in his chair, hooked up to his machines. "Ah, my dears," he said when he saw us through the doorway. "School has been cancelled? That was a wise decision, Ikea. I feel it in my bones that this is a bad one. Take the child to your mother. We have something urgent to discuss." "Why can't I hear?" whined Kara. "Childhood comes but once," said my father, struggling to find his breath. He put his mask over his face and inhaled deeply. Then he went on. "Though the world is gone, we remain human and are swayed by the dark passions and knowledge of unclean things. Bathe a while more in the warm, delightful waters of youth, my Kara. Splash in joy and leave the doors closed for as long as you are able. That may be a while yet, I hope. Relish in the mystery and the wonder at what's on the other side." Kara sighed. "Fine, I'll go with Grandma," she huffed. When I was alone with my father, I approached him and put my hand on his arm. "What is it?" I asked. "Shh," he said. "Do you feel that?" I was about to reply that I didn't feel anything unusual, when from outside, we heard a monstrous crash. "The sky is falling," said my father. "It's a shift?" I asked. "It's more than a shift, I'm afraid. It's rebirth." Outside, a steadily mounting rumble was growing louder. "Father," I said, "what are you talking about?" My father sighed deeply and was silent for a while. I heard the beeping of his machines as the noise outside threatened to drown them out. At last he spoke. "I haven't been truthful with you, my love, nor with anyone." I waited for him to explain himself. "Oh," he said, "I'm quite sure that the world above has been blasted to hell. That much is the truth, that they were ready to destroy the world as the natural conclusion of their hatred. But the weapon, I dismantled it before I came below and brought the key component with me. The house itself began to shake, despite its foundation running endlessly deep into the earth. "Father," I said, "we should shut up in the steel room until this passes." He lifted his hand as far as the tubes attached to his arm would allow and waved dismissively. "The steel room won't protect you. Nothing will." "You're scaring me," I said. Indeed, I felt like a small child again, experiencing her first shift. I thought of Kara and how scared she must be. "What is going on?" "The weapon," my father said. "I tell people that it was a supercharged nuclear device of sorts. But that's not what it was at all. It didn't destroy things by blasting them with radiation. It erased things entirely from existence." I tried to grasp what he was saying as books began to topple off of the shelves. "That doesn't make sense." "Nor does it make sense that we've been living underground for the past 40 years. Oh, I've told a million lies that are convincing enough, as long as you don't stop to think about them or do a modicum of research. And I know it's different for you since you were born here and it's all you've ever known. But the air we breathe, the food we grow, the electricity we enjoy, it's quite implausible that thousands of us could enjoy these things so far underground without some help. I heard glass shatter somewhere in the house, and my mother came running into the room with Kara in her arms. Kara was crying inconsolably. "Seth!" my mother shouted. "What is this?" "I was just explaining, dear," said my father. "I suppose you all might as well hear it at this point. It's already over, I'm afraid. I can feel it carrying my mind away to the nothing. My soul too, whatever soul there is." "What are you talking about?" I screamed. 42 years ago, he said. "I was testing a new mechanism at the lab late at night when I felt another presence there. I didn't see anyone or anything, so I tried to shake the feeling, but it wouldn't shake. It kept intensifying, as if the thing were getting closer. But there was nothing there. I figured that I needed some sleep, so I put my head down on my desk and took a nap. As I was sleeping, I felt it slip into me. I felt it all over my body, like ice, and then in my head, like endless darkness. "Grandpa's scaring me," wailed Kara. I could barely hear her, as the roar all around us had grown so intense. In fact, I wondered how it was possible that I could hear my father over the noise, until I realized that he wasn't speaking out loud at all. I was hearing him in my mind. "We know so little of what there is," said my father, "and so little of what is not. It's like turning on a light switch or watching a magic trick. Just because it's gone doesn't mean it isn't there. And just because it's there doesn't mean it isn't gone. It's as simple as snapping your fingers once you understand it. But we're not capable of understanding it. Not without help." My father was bleeding from the nose and struggling to keep his eyes open. But he went on. "You see, I was the weapon that was to erase half the world. It would have been so easy, I realized. I merely needed to focus on it for a few days. And just like that, gone. No trace of it, on the land or in the minds of men. It wanted me to go forth and wipe out existence. And I was prepared to do so. Arrangements were made, and I was strapped to an enormous machine of my own design to build and focus my energies, the energies of the thing inside me. But as those energies were mounting, they loosened their grip on my mind, and I realized, truly, what I was about to do. So I escaped and ran. There was no need for him to go on. I saw it all in my mind. He went back to his house, where his wife, my mother, was sleeping. He tracked her out of bed, and together they made their way to the small bomb shelter that they had constructed. And then, with his mind, he turned that bomb shelter into a town, with new people who had never existed before, but suddenly had identities and memories, as if they had always existed. Nobody that I knew other than my family was real. Or they were, but not in the typical way of evolving through millions of years and having ancestors who reproduced. They were simply created out of thin air. "I am dying, my dears," said my father. "And when I do, this will all be gone. I should have given you more warning. But this has come on so suddenly. I have been fighting it for so many years. And now, in a day, it's over. Try for the radiated world above if you wish. Or join me, as we become nothing. It will not be so bad." I stood in total shock as my world literally collapsed around me. I felt a hand roughly grab my arm and came back to awareness.
There's a hatch!
My mother was shouting.
To above! Come on!
Goodbye, my father said. And we ran. We ran out of the house and toward the elevator. It was blocked by a pile of rubble, so we tried for the massive stone stairwell. I felt my father leave us as we started up the stairs. I looked behind me, and all I could see was darkness coming up behind us, getting closer. I had Kara slung over my shoulder and moved forward with all of my strength. I felt an incredibly cold presence following us every step of the way. We reached the top floor, and my mother led us to a massive metal door. I turned and saw that the nothing was there, just on the other side of the field. It was turning the only world I had ever known into nothing. I say that it was darkness, but that's only because I can't describe it any other way. It was a blank spot in my mind. It was simply something that wasn't there anymore. We pushed the door open and looked up at the long ladder.
Go,
said my mother.
I'll be right behind you.
I made Kara cling to my back and started climbing. It was such a great effort, and my body resisted me with each rung. Kara was moaning nonsense into my ear. She was delirious.
It's so cold,
my mother said from just below me. Then, louder.
I never knew Akeya. I promise you that. He fooled me too. I know, Mom, I said.
And I did somehow. We reached the hatch. I tried to push it open, but it was too heavy.
Please, hurry,
said my mom.
It's almost here. Can you help me push?
I asked Kara. Together, we pushed. The hatch gave a little, but still didn't lift.
We have to all do it,
said my mother.
At the same time.
I felt her reaching around me as she climbed up to the same rung that I was on.
On 3. 1, 2, 3.
I pushed with all of my strength, and the hatch flew open. My mother put her arms on my hips and lifted as I pushed with my legs. And then, Kara and I were above.
Shut it!
Screamed my mother. I looked down through sun-dazed eyes to see the nothing crawling up her legs.
Mom?
I said, reaching my hand down. She slapped it away.
Shut it now!
The nothing was up at her neck now. I slammed the hatch shut.
Who was that?
Asked Kara, standing up on the grass.
Where are we?
They were good questions that I didn't have the answers to immediately. There was something, a vague feeling way back in my mind. I tried to pull it closer, but it didn't want to come. Who was that? It was somebody I know. I struggled there beneath the sun. Oh, just let it go. It'll come to you sooner or later. And then, no, this is important. You have to remember, it was somebody you know and loved.
Mommy?
Said Kara.
Can we go home now?
Mommy. It was my mother. And we were below, and now we're above. I looked around. We were on a raised section of land. A hill, I think it's called. Above was the sky, with the sun peeking out from behind clouds. I remembered what it looked like from the textbooks. And those things in the trees singing, those were birds. At the bottom of the hill, there was a road. A bright red convertible whizzed by with the top down. There was a young couple inside, laughing about something. "We are home," I said, taking my daughter's hand and stepping into the new day.